My name is Margaret Hill. I'm 82 years old, and for most of my life, I believed that love and patience could hold a family together. I raised 3 children on my own after my husband died in a car accident when I was just 36. I worked as a school janitor by day and cleaned office buildings at night. Everything I did was for them. And then, for my grandchildren. But I never imagined that one day, I would be standing in the middle of my own yard with blood trickling down the side of my face, caused by a stone hurled at me by my 10-year-old granddaughter. And what did her mother, my own daughter-in-law, say? "She's just a kid, Margaret." That was the moment something inside me cracked. I wiped the blood with the sleeve of my sweater and looked around the house I built with my husband's life insurance, the home I signed over to my son and his wife when they were struggling. I gave them shelter, love, and my pension. And now, I was sleeping on a small folding bed in the storage room, treated like a burden in the house I gave them. I looked into my granddaughter's eyes. She didn't flinch, even smirked. And that was when I knew I had to take back everything. But first, let me tell you how we got here. Started small. After my stroke 2 years ago, I moved into my son's home so they could care for me. Or so I thought. First it was warm. My grandson Liam would sit by my feet and we'd play checkers. My daughter-in-law Karen would bring me soup and rub my shoulders. Felt loved, useful. But as my health improved, their warmth faded. Karen began sighing when I asked for help. My son David came home later and later, too tired to talk. Liam stopped playing with me altogether. And my granddaughter Abby. She watched everything with those big brown eyes. Then one day my favorite armchair, an old floral one from the 70s that my husband and I used to sit in together, disappeared. When I asked about it, Karen said, it didn't match the decor anymore. I swallowed my feelings and tried to let it go, but things kept vanishing. My bedroom lamp, painting from my room, even my Bible. Still, I told myself it was fine. I was just grateful to be with family. Until one day, I came into the kitchen to find Karen tossing my medications in the trash. "Why would you do that?" I asked, my voice shaking. She turned and laughed. "You don't need them. You're barely functioning. You forget things anyway." My heart dropped. Was that what they thought of me? I tried to talk to David, but he brushed it off. "Mom, she's under stress. Just let her be. Don't overreact." Was I overreacting? Then came the insults. Soft at first. Karen saying, "The house smells like old people," while looking at me. Or Abby repeating, "You're slow, Granny," each time I moved too slowly in the hallway. I thought I was imagining it. Maybe I was too sensitive. But one night, I overheard them through the vent. "She's never going to die, is she?" Karen whispered. David laughed. "Not until after the house is officially ours. The documents aren't finalized yet." I sat up in my bed and stared at the wall all night. It wasn't love keeping me here. It was greed. Still I stayed quiet. Until the rock. It was a sunny afternoon. I was sitting under the big oak tree in the yard, knitting. Abby and Liam were playing nearby. I smiled as I watched them. Then Abby stopped, picked up a jagged stone and walked up to me. "You took my room," she said. "I'm sorry," I asked, confused. She glared at me. "Mom said you're the reason I have to share with Liam." Before I could respond, the stone was flying through the air. It hit my temple with a sharp crack. Fell back. Blood ran down my cheek. Gasp. Liam screamed. Karen came running out. But when I told her what happened, she barely blinked. "She's just a kid, Margaret," she said again, like it excused everything. That was when I stood up, blood and all, and said the words I had never dared say aloud. "I'm taking back my house." Karen laughed. "You wouldn't dare." But oh, I would. Because what none of them knew was that I never actually finalized the ownership transfer. I had the papers drawn up, but I never signed the final legal document. The house still legally belonged to me. And I still had my mind. They thought I was weak. They thought I forgot. But I remembered everything. And now, I was going to remind them exactly who built that house brick by brick, both with my hands and my love. The first person I called was someone I hadn't spoken to in over a decade. But the moment I heard her voice, I knew everything was about to change. If you're still with me, don't miss what happens next, because this story is just beginning. Like, comment, and subscribe if you believe no one is ever too old to take their power back. Next chapter is going to blow your mind. Her name was Patricia. She was my best friend once, my ride or die since we were 9 years old. We drifted apart after a misunderstanding during our husband's funeral planning. Both men passed within months of each other. But I had no one else I trusted. No one else who would understand what it meant to watch your own family, your own blood, twist everything you gave them into chains they used to bind you. When she picked up the phone and heard my voice, there was a long pause. "Margaret," she whispered. "Is that really you?" I nearly broke down right there. "It's me, Pat." A moment of silence. Then she said, "I'm on my way." She lived 2 towns away. Within 2 hours, Patricia was on my porch, standing there in her long cardigan and boots like a soldier reporting for duty. Her hair had grayed since I last saw her, but her eyes still sparkled with fire. "What did they do to you?" she said, staring at the bandage on my head. I pulled her into the house before Karen or David returned from the grocery store. I showed her the documents, the unsigned house transfer, the title deed, the bank records. My fingers trembled as I unfolded each one. "I thought signing the house over was the right thing to do," I whispered. "I didn't want them to struggle. Now look what they've done." Patricia looked me in the eye. "They made one mistake." "What?" "They forgot who you are." And in that moment something inside me clicked. I wasn't just Margaret the grandma. I was Margaret the survivor. Margaret who buried a husband, raised 3 kids alone, and cleaned school floors until my back nearly broke. I had given and given, but they had mistaken my giving for weakness. "I want to move forward with legal action," I said. "Can you help me?" Patricia grinned. "I already called my nephew. He's a lawyer. He's on his way." That night, I didn't sleep in the storage room. Patricia made me a bed on the living room couch, and we stayed up drinking hot cocoa and whispering about the past. Our first crushes, our late husbands, our babies. For the first time in months, I laughed. The next morning, the doorbell rang. David opened it, and there stood Patricia's nephew, Stephen Grant, a no-nonsense attorney with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue. "Good morning," Stephen said politely. "I'm here on behalf of Mrs. Margaret Hill. We'll be needing access to the original house documents and any relevant correspondence regarding home ownership." Karen scoffed. "What is this? A prank?" Stephen smiled. "Not at all. But I do recommend you get your own attorney. Quickly." David turned to me, furious. "Mom, what's going on?" I looked him in the eye. "What's going on is that I've decided I want my house back." He shook his head, blinking like I'd grown horns. "You can't just. This is our home now." "No," I said firmly. "This is my home. I just let you stay here. And now, that kindness has expired." They didn't take it well. Karen screamed. "We've spent money renovating. We changed the floors, repainted the kitchen. You can't just evict us like we're squatters." Stephen calmly opened a folder. "Actually, the law says otherwise. Since the deed remains under Mrs. Hill's name and no binding legal transfer took place, she has every right to reclaim her property. And unless you can prove otherwise, your presence here is by informal permission, which can be revoked." Karen's voice broke. "We have kids, for God's sake." I raised a hand. "And I raised you, David. But that didn't stop you from locking me in the storage room." He opened his mouth but no words came. That evening, Stephen began preparing the eviction notice. It would be served in 30 days. I offered them a chance to stay temporarily under a lease agreement, but Karen exploded. "A lease? You want rent from your own son." I looked her square in the eye. "I want respect. And if I can't get that, then yes, I want rent." Patricia clapped softly behind me. "Amen." Things turned cold after that. Karen refused to speak to me. David walked around like a zombie, torn between loyalty to his wife and shame toward me. Liam avoided eye contact. But Abby still looked at me with smug defiance. One night, I caught her sneaking into my room and peeking into my jewelry drawer. I watched her from the hallway, looking for something. She froze, then slowly turned. I thought it was mine. Mom said you're going to die soon anyway. I nearly dropped the cup in my hand. I took a deep breath. Well, tell your mom I'm living long enough to teach you all a lesson. And I meant it. Over the next 2 weeks, Stephen discovered even more. Karen had been using my name to take out store credit cards. Over $8,000 in purchases. Luxury shoes, furniture, and electronics. I'd been getting strange calls from debt collectors, but she always told me it was spam. Now I knew the truth. Stephen smiled. We have enough to press charges. Do you want to pursue it? I stared out the window. I could see Liam and Abby playing in the yard. I'm not sure yet, I said. But I want her to know that I can. The official eviction notice was served the next morning. Karen screamed. David cried. I didn't. I stood there with my cane and my cup of tea, watching them read the document on the porch. Felt like justice. Felt like finally being seen. But that night something happened I didn't expect. I woke up to the smell of smoke. Smoke coming from the kitchen. And when I got there, the fire was already crawling up the side of the curtains. If this chapter made your heart race, wait till you see what happens next. Do you think Karen set the fire on purpose? Or was it something else? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Next chapter is just heating up. The smoke stung my eyes as I stumbled into the kitchen. Flames licked the corner of the curtain, and the toaster was glowing red-hot, far beyond anything normal. My trembling hands reached for the fire extinguisher I kept under the sink. Thank God I hadn't let Karen throw that out too. I sprayed the foam with shaky precision, coughing through the fumes, my chest burning. The fire died down, but not without leaving a black smear across the wall and a thick, sour smell hanging in the air. Just as I turned to open the window, David and Karen burst in, both of them wide-eyed, hair tousled from sleep. What happened? David barked. Karen pressed a towel to her mouth, dramatically coughing. Was it electrical? Did you do something, Margaret? I didn't answer right away. I was still watching the toaster. Something about it didn't sit right. Its lever had been jammed down, far too forcefully. On closer inspection, I realized it had been wedged with a butter knife. A metal butter knife. And I hadn't even used the toaster that day. I was asleep, I said finally. Something's wrong with that toaster. Karen shrugged far too casually. It's probably just old. Like the rest of the things in this house. I turned to look her in the eye. Her pupils darted. She knew. But I wasn't ready to accuse. Not yet. Not without proof. Because if I made a claim like that without backing it up, she'd turn it into a weapon. But inside, he knew. Patricia came over the next morning and stared at the scorched wall. She did this, she said flatly. She wanted to scare you. Or worse. I didn't respond. Instead, I handed her a small recording device. What's this? She asked. My ears might be old, I said. But my instincts aren't. I think it's time we start gathering the truth. You see, after years of being dismissed and treated like a fragile old doll, I started learning how to protect myself. Stephen's paralegal had shown me how to use a voice-activated recorder, and I'd placed one under the hallway table just outside the kitchen. When I played it back that evening, Patricia and I sat in stunned silence. Karen's voice hushed. Just wedge it and leave. The wires are frayed anyway. Maybe it'll short out. David. Karen, that's crazy. What if something actually happens? Karen. Then she goes to a home and we get the house finally. Just like we planned. My hand trembled as I paused the recording. Patricia's face turned pale. Margaret, she said slowly, that wasn't just a scare. That was attempted murder. The next morning I took the recording to Stephen. His eyebrows rose as he listened, but his face remained composed. We can go to the police with this, he said. But it'll be messy. A full investigation. You'll have to testify. I stared down at my folded hands. I'm not scared of messy anymore. That afternoon, Karen returned from her hot yoga class. I was sitting at the dining table with Stephen, waiting. I assume this is about the eviction, she said with a sigh. Let's just get it over with. Stephen placed the recorder on the table and hit play. Karen's face drained of color. Her jaw twitched, but she didn't flinch. When the clip ended, she crossed her arms. That doesn't prove anything. That could be anyone. Stephen raised an eyebrow. You're welcome to take that stance. But it matches perfectly with the evidence from the toaster and the fire marshal's report. And when we hand it over to the authorities, they'll have more questions. Karen turned to me then, eyes narrowing. You set me up. I leaned forward, steady and cold. You set my house on fire. David walked in then, holding Liam's backpack. He stopped short at the scene unfolding. What's going on? Karen whipped around. She's accusing me of trying to kill her. Based on a toaster. Stephen stood, gathering his papers. David, I suggest you speak to your wife. And a lawyer. Karen didn't speak to me for days after that. David was silent too, trapped between loyalty to his wife and the growing weight of undeniable truth. But the strangest shift was in Abby. That little girl with the stone-cold eyes. She started lingering in the hallway, watching me, silent. One evening I found a drawing tucked under my door. A crayon picture of an old woman with a sad face, and a speech bubble that read, I'm sorry, Grandma. I wanted to cry. But I didn't trust it. Not yet. And I was right. Because just 3 nights later, I woke up to find my walker missing from beside my bed. I struggled to sit up, pain shooting through my hip, and that's when I saw it. My walker was outside the room. And the door. From the outside. I banged on the door, yelling. But the house was silent. The air conditioning had been turned off. The windows were shut. It was hot, suffocating. And I was trapped. What would you do if your own family turned your home into a prison? Do you think David will finally open his eyes? Or is he too far gone? Drop your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe. Next chapter is coming and trust me, you'll need a seatbelt. The heat in that room was unbearable. Sweat dripped down my neck, my hands trembled, and for a moment, I truly believed they were going to let me die in there. My breathing became shallow, and I leaned against the bedpost, too dizzy to stand, too panicked to cry. I banged harder on the door. David. Karen. Let me out. Nothing. They'd left me there on purpose. I don't know how long I sat on the floor, rocking back and forth, heart racing. Time lost all meaning in that stuffy prison. My skin felt like it was boiling, and my tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. That's when I started to hear voices in my head. Not real ones, just memories. My husband's voice. My mother's lullaby. My youngest son's giggle when he was a toddler. All the pieces of me they were trying to erase. But I wasn't ready to disappear. With every ounce of strength left in me, I dragged myself to the door. I pressed my back against it and started banging. Not with my hands this time, but with my foot. Over and over. I screamed until my throat burned. Then footsteps. Small whisper. Key turning. The door creaked open and there she was. Her little hand trembling, guilt splashed across her face. Grandma, she said. Mom said not to open it. She said you'd be okay. I stared at her. And what do you think? She didn't answer, but she helped me to my feet. That small act of kindness from a child I thought was lost gave me just enough strength to shuffle to the hallway. Patricia was supposed to visit that morning. I prayed she hadn't been turned away. I reached the front door and opened it, and there she was. Patricia gasped when she saw me. What happened? Why do you look like you've been cooked in an oven? I collapsed into her arms. We called Stephen immediately. He documented everything. The photos, the door lock, the missing walker, the security camera footage from Patricia's dashcam, which caught Karen whispering to Abby on the porch just before I was locked in. She said Grandma was sick in the head and needed rest, Abby told Patricia quietly later that day. Now we had more than just a pattern of abuse. We had evidence of deliberate endangerment. The next morning, police officers showed up. Karen lost it. "You called the cops on me. On your own family," she screamed at David, thinking he was the one who'd finally grown a spine. He wasn't. I stepped out from behind the officer. "No, Karen. Called them. On you." She was taken in for questioning, and the house fell into a strange silence. David sat on the stairs with his head in his hands while Abby clung to his side. Liam stayed in his room. And I sat in the kitchen, sipping tea, feeling like a ghost haunting her own home. That night, David knocked on my bedroom door. "I didn't know," he said quietly. I stared at him. "You chose not to know," I replied. "That's worse." He wept. Not a loud cry, just silent tears rolling down his cheeks. "I'm sorry, Mom." I nodded, but I didn't comfort him. Couldn't. Something in me had shifted. The next week was a blur. Social services visited. The courts began their process. Karen was released on bail, but Stephen had already filed the restraining order. She couldn't come within 500 feet of me, or the house. And yet, the nightmare wasn't over. Because Karen wasn't the kind of woman to walk away quietly. 2 days later, I received a letter in the mail. It was anonymous, but I knew her handwriting. I would have recognized that sharp, slanted script anywhere. The letter read, "This isn't over. You think you've won. You have no idea what's coming." I handed it to Stephen. "Is this enough to strengthen the case?" "It helps," he said. "But we'll need more. We can't afford a technicality." I knew she'd strike again. I could feel it in my bones. She was arrogant, entitled, and losing everything. That's a dangerous kind of person. So I made my next move. Changed the locks. I installed security cameras at every entrance. And most importantly, I had Stephen file paperwork to permanently reclaim full ownership of the property, ensuring that no future manipulation or loophole could wrestle it away from me again. But just as things began to stabilize, just when I thought I could breathe, it happened. I was sitting on the porch swing with Patricia, enjoying the breeze, when a brick flew through the living room window. Glass shattered. I screamed. Liam started crying inside. Abby ran out the front door, her face pale. On the brick, taped securely with red duct tape, was another note. "This house was never yours. Built it. Paid for it. I'll burn it down before I let you keep it." It was signed Gay. Patricia grabbed her phone, but I raised my hand. "Let's not call the police yet," I said calmly. "I think it's time I called someone else." She frowned. "Who?" I looked out toward the fence. The neighbor's son, Marcus, had once offered to help with yard work. He worked part-time as a security installer and part-time at the sheriff's office. Called him. Told him everything. Marcus listened carefully. "You want to catch her red-handed?" He nodded. He grinned. "I'll help you set the trap." We installed motion-triggered lights, pressure sensors near the back window, and a discreet camera hidden inside the living room clock. I even left the house one evening, loudly, letting Karen believe I was gone for the weekend. Then I waited. And just before midnight the motion lights flashed. Through the lens of that camera, I saw it all. Karen in a hoodie and gloves, creeping toward the back door with a crowbar in hand. What she didn't know was that Marcus and an off-duty officer were already stationed in my neighbor's yard. By the time she opened the door, they were behind her. Breaking and entering. This time there was no bail. And that's when everything began to shift. But you'll have to wait until Chapter 5 to hear how her arrest shattered the whole family from the inside, and how the house, for the first time in years, became a home again. If this chapter had you gasping, just wait for what's coming. Do you believe Karen's twisted entitlement can be undone? What would you have done in Grandma Margaret's shoes? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button, and make sure you're subscribed, because next chapter is going to bring justice like never before. Karen's arrest made the news. Local woman arrested breaking into mother-in-law's home after eviction battle. The headline sat front and center on the community blog the next morning. Her mugshot was everywhere, angry, red-eyed, and still somehow trying to look like the victim. For a woman who used to post Bible verses and motivational quotes about family first, it was the beginning of a very public fall from grace. David didn't go to the station. He didn't call a lawyer. He didn't even speak for 2 whole days. He just sat on the porch swing in the evenings, watching the sun go down with that hollow look men get when they realize they married a monster, and stayed. It wasn't just the shame of Karen's arrest that shook him. It was everything that came after. When the police searched her car, they found dozens of my personal documents, copies of my ID, bank statements, even an old draft of my will that I thought I'd lost. She had been planning something far deeper than a takeover of the house. She wanted everything. "I don't know who she is anymore," David told me one evening, his voice barely above a whisper. "You never knew," I said. "You only saw what you wanted to see." His eyes filled with tears again. He didn't argue. A week later, the court granted me a full protective order, and Karen was denied bail this time due to the break-in and attempted arson evidence. The district attorney decided to proceed with charges for elder abuse, identity theft, attempted arson, and property damage. But the drama was far from over. Karen's parents came to the house. Not to apologize. Oh no, but to demand custody of Liam and Abby. They stood at my doorstep, arms crossed, disgust on their faces like I was some kind of thief. "You're too old to raise kids," her father snapped. "We'll be petitioning the court. Those kids belong with family." I didn't even blink. "And what do you think I am? A neighbor?" Her mother snorted. "You're unstable. You made our daughter suffer." Patricia, who was standing behind me, stepped forward. "Your daughter tried to murder her mother-in-law. That's not suffering. That's a crime." They left angry, but not before vowing to involve lawyers. When I told Stephen, he laughed softly. "Let them try. As long as David remains in the home and doesn't support their custody claim, they don't have a legal leg to stand on." But that raised another question. David. Could I trust him? He was still sleeping in the spare room down the hall, barely speaking to his own children, and spending his nights pacing the kitchen floor. So I confronted him. "David," I said one morning, "what's your plan?" He rubbed his forehead. "I don't know. That's not good enough," I said. "You have 2 children who just watched their mother try to kill their grandmother. You have to do something." He looked up at me broken. "You want me to leave, don't you?" I stared at him for a long time. "No. I want you to wake up." That night, I found a note on my pillow, scribbled in David's handwriting. "I'm sorry. I've enrolled in counseling. Starting this week." It was a start. The house was quieter now. Tense but calmer. The kids were adjusting. Liam started sitting near me at breakfast again. Abby, too ashamed to meet my eyes, had stopped with the sneers and silent stares. She was quieter, watchful, unsure. One morning, I found her standing in the hallway holding a drawing. 'Twas of me, smiling, holding a pie. Liam and Abby stood beside me. Karen was not in the picture. "I drew this at school," she said. "They told us to draw someone who keeps us safe." My eyes welled with tears. I nodded and took it gently. "Thank you, sweetheart." But peace didn't last long. Because just 2 days later, we received an anonymous envelope in the mail. Inside were photos, taken through the windows, of me, the kids, even Patricia. It was Karen's handwriting on the back of each picture. "Still watching. Always will be." We handed the evidence over to Stephen, who passed it along to the DA. The judge upgraded Karen's case to include stalking, and a full no-contact order was issued. But the damage was done. I sat the children down and told them the truth. "Your mother is sick," I said gently. "But that doesn't mean you are. You get to choose who you want to be." Liam nodded solemnly. Abby clutched my hand tightly. That night, David approached me again. I want to sign the house over to you again, he said. Officially this time. I want it to be yours alone. I need to earn your trust back. I took a deep breath. That's a step. But it's not enough. He swallowed. What else do I need to do? I looked him dead in the eye. Raise your children to never turn into their mother. He nodded. And I believed him. The court date finally arrived. Karen, now a ghost of her former self, stood before the judge, flanked by two attorneys who looked like they regretted taking her case. Her voice was meek, trembling, rehearsed. I never meant to hurt anyone. I was overwhelmed. The judge raised an eyebrow. You set a trap in a toaster, broke into a home, stalked a senior citizen, and endangered your children. That's not overwhelmed. That's criminal intent. Karen's face crumpled. She was sentenced to 2 years in a women's correctional facility with mandatory psychiatric counseling and no visitation rights to the children for the duration of her sentence. As they led her out of the courtroom, she turned back and looked at me. You destroyed my life, she whispered. And for the first time I didn't flinch. No, I said softly. You did that yourself. When we got home, Patricia uncorked a bottle of sparkling juice, and we sat in the kitchen like we used to years ago, laughing, crying, relieved. I looked around my kitchen at the familiar cabinets, the old clock, the scratched-up table where my grandbabies had spilled cereal. It was my house again. But more importantly, it was my life again. But even then I knew one thing for sure. Karen may have been locked up. But the scars she left, they still had a story to tell. And that story was only halfway done. Do you believe justice was served? Can David truly change? Should Grandma Margaret raise those kids on her own? Or should David be given a chance to make it right? Drop your thoughts in the comments, tap that like button, and be sure to subscribe. Next chapter will reveal what happens when Karen's past, and an old secret, comes back to haunt the whole family. You don't want to miss it. 3 weeks after the trial, just when life was beginning to feel safe again, I received another letter. This one not from Karen, but from a name I hadn't seen in over 30 years. Angela Prescott. I stood at the mailbox, fingers trembling as I stared at the return address. Angela was Karen's mother's younger sister. She had left town decades ago under mysterious circumstances, cut off from the family completely. I'd heard whispers, scandals, inheritance fights, even a brief mention of child services. But nothing ever confirmed. I opened the envelope carefully and unfolded the crisp paper. Dear Mrs. Hill, you don't know me, but I know you. I have information about Karen's past that could explain everything. Things her parents buried. I've kept it to myself for decades, but after seeing her face on the news, I realized the truth must come out. Meet me, please, before it's too late. At the bottom was a phone number and a meeting location. An old diner off Highway 64. I didn't know whether to cry or scream. Why now? Why after everything? Patricia urged me to ignore it. You've been through enough, Margaret. Let sleeping devils lie. But I couldn't. Because if there was even a sliver of truth to what Angela claimed, it might be the key to protecting Abby and Liam from repeating their mother's mistakes. So I called the number. Angela's voice was soft, raspy, tired, but steady. I was wondering when you'd call, she said. I've waited 28 years for this. The next afternoon, Patricia drove me to the diner. I wore my Sunday best. I needed to walk in there like the matriarch I was, not a wounded old woman chasing ghosts. Angela was already seated at the corner booth, wearing a gray shawl, her white hair pulled into a low bun. She looked like someone who had carried too many secrets for too long. We sat in silence for a while. Then she spoke. Karen was born into a house of lies, she said. Her father was abusive. Not just emotionally, physically, sexually. Her mother covered it up. She blamed me when I tried to intervene. That's why I left. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. Angela continued. Karen was 6 when she watched her father beat my dog to death in the backyard. She laughed. That was the first time I knew something was broken. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small journal. It was tattered and brown, The pages yellowed with time. "This belonged to Karen," she said. "She wrote things. Terrible things. Fantasies about hurting people, harming animals, controlling others. Kept it. I didn't know what to do. But now, maybe it will help you understand." I flipped through the pages slowly. Childish handwriting, crude drawings, lists of lies she'd told. One entry made my blood run cold. "Mom is stupid. One day, I'll make her fall down the stairs. Then I'll smile at her funeral." Closed the book. "Why are you giving this to me now?" I asked, barely above a whisper. Angela looked me dead in the eye. "Because your granddaughter is watching. And if we don't stop the cycle, she'll become Karen all over again." When I returned home that night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at Abby as she dozed on the couch, a blanket draped over her shoulders. So innocent, so conflicted. I sat down beside her and whispered, "You don't have to be like her, sweetheart." He stirred. "What?" "Nothing," I said softly. "Go back to sleep." The next day I showed David the journal. He wept when he read it. "She never told me anything like this. None of it." "She never needed to," I replied. "She controlled everything with silence." David began attending therapy twice a week. He invited Liam to join him. Then, eventually, Abby. Progress was slow, but real. And for the first time in years, laughter returned to the house. Soft, careful laughter, like something fragile learning how to stand again. But just when I thought we were out of the storm, I got another phone call. It was the prison. Karen had been hospitalized after an altercation with another inmate. She was stable but sustained head injuries. They said she was asking for me. "I think you should go," Stephen said when I told him. "Closure isn't for her. It's for you." I didn't want to, but I knew I had to. So I went. She looked smaller in the hospital bed. Ill. Worn down. A shadow of the storm she used to be. Her eyes opened when she heard my cane tapping across the tile floor. "I knew you'd come," she croaked. "I came to say goodbye," I said coldly. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said. "I just hated how you looked at me." "I looked at you with love," I replied. "Until you threw it back at me." She let out a bitter laugh. "You think Abby's going to forgive you? She'll grow up and hate you too." "No," I said, leaning forward. "Because I'm going to raise her. With honesty. With boundaries. With love. Something you never understood." Karen's smile faded. "Goodbye, Karen." As I turned to leave, she whispered, "I never told you. David isn't your son." Stop. My breath caught. "What?" She coughed, laughed again. "Ask him about 1987. Go on." I left the room shaking, my mind spiraling. What could she possibly mean? Was this her last twist of the knife? When I got home, I confronted David. And his face told me everything. He knew exactly what she was talking about. And what he confessed that night would change the course of my entire legacy. Did Karen tell the truth? What dark family secret is David hiding from his own mother? The next chapter will uncover a hidden betrayal that dates back decades. Like, comment, and subscribe if you believe the past always finds its way home. Next chapter will shake everything you thought you knew. I stood in the living room, staring at David like I didn't recognize the man in front of me. My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear anything else. "Tell me," I said. "Now." David didn't look up. He sat frozen on the couch, fingers clenched together like a child who'd been caught with something too heavy to explain. "Mom," he whispered. "It's true." My stomach sank. "What's true, David?" He reached into the drawer and pulled out an old, wrinkled envelope. He handed it to me without looking at my face. "I found this when I was 17. Karen found it first. She showed it to me, said you were hiding it because you were ashamed of me." I unfolded the paper slowly, my hands shaking. It was in my handwriting. "If you're reading this, it means I never had the courage to say it out loud. Your father raised you like his own, but you came from something I never wanted. What matters most is that you are mine. Always. My knees gave out, and I sank into the nearest chair. I had buried that part of my life so deeply. I thought it would never surface again. I never meant for David to find out that way. I thought I was protecting him from a pain I carried alone. I thought you didn't tell me because I was a mistake, David said, tears rolling down his cheeks. You were never a mistake, I replied. You were the reason I got out of bed every morning. You were the light in the darkest time of my life. He sobbed then, not the quiet kind but the kind that racks through a man's whole body. Patricia stood quietly by the kitchen doorway, her hands clasped, watching the pieces of my family crack open again. Karen used it against me, David finally said, wiping his face. She said since I wasn't really Dad's son, that I wasn't entitled to the house. That everything you had should go to her and the kids. No. I started to believe her. I looked at him. This man I had raised. No boy. She was wrong, I said firmly. You are my son. No paper, no lie, no past can change that. I want to fix this, Mom, he said. Please. I want to earn your trust again. You can start by standing beside me from here on out, I said. For Liam. For Abby. For you. He nodded. That was all I needed. But healing doesn't arrive neatly tied in bows. Comes in waves and sometimes unexpected currents. That very night a letter arrived. Another anonymous envelope. Inside a folded court notice. Karen had filed a new motion. From prison. She was requesting visitation again. Only this time she claimed that I was unfit. That I was mentally declining, emotionally manipulative, and paranoid due to age. She even listed my own son as a witness to her claims. She named me. David gasped as he read it. I nodded slowly. She's playing her last card. Trying to twist the truth one final time. Then we play ours, he said. And this time we play it together. We called Stephen the next morning and began preparing our response. I also contacted the doctor who'd been monitoring my health since the stroke. He provided a full mental wellness evaluation that clearly proved I was in sound mind and fully capable. But even with that, the stress weighed on me. I found myself checking the locks at night, double-checking the stove, glancing over my shoulder more often than I liked to admit. Karen's reach might have been behind bars, but her shadow still hovered. One evening, Abby approached me after dinner. "Grandma," she said, eyes wide. "Are you sad again?" I looked down at her. "Why would you think that?" I shrugged. "You frown when you think. And you've been thinking a lot lately." I knelt in front of her. "I'm thinking about how to keep you and Liam safe. That's my job." She hugged me tightly, resting her cheek on my shoulder. "You already do that. Just by being here." That hug restored something in me. It reminded me why I fought so hard, why I had endured every betrayal, every insult, every legal battle. It was for them. David, too, was changing. He spent more time with the kids. Attended Liam's school open house. Helped Abby with her homework. Even started cooking on Sundays again. Just like he used to when Karen was too tired. "I forgot what peace feels like," he told me one night as we sipped tea on the porch. "It's not peace yet," I said. "But we're getting there." Then, just as the court was reviewing Karen's latest motion, Stephen showed up with news that changed everything. "I thought you should know," he said, handing me a folded document. Karen granted temporary guardianship to her parents 3 days before her arrest. They're filing to take custody of Liam and Abby. My heart dropped. "They're calling you unstable. Citing age. Past trauma. Anything they can dig up. It's a last-ditch effort, but it's legal." The room fell silent. David looked at me. "What do we do?" I stood slowly, my hands clenched but steady. "We do what we always do," I said. "We show up. We speak truth. And we don't back down." But inside, I knew this would be the hardest battle yet. Because this time, it wasn't Karen knocking at the door. It was the people who raised her. And that meant they had learned from the very same playbook. "What do you think?" Can Karen's parents win custody of the kids? Should Margaret finally expose everything in court to stop this once and for all? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Next chapter will reveal the most shocking betrayal yet. It came in the form of a legal envelope, one of those thick, cream-colored ones that makes your stomach drop the moment you see it in the mailbox. It was addressed to Margaret Hill, custodian of minors, Abby and Liam Winters. Patricia and I opened it at the kitchen table. Hands steady but hearts hammering. Inside was a court document, signed and notarized. Karen had signed over temporary guardianship rights to her parents. Apparently, 3 days before her arrest, she drafted and filed a contingency guardianship petition in the event of her unlawful detainment. That's what she called prison. Her parents, those same smug, bitter people who showed up on my porch weeks ago, were demanding a hearing to take the children. Can she do that? Patricia asked, horrified. Stephen, who arrived within the hour, ran his fingers through his graying hair. It's not illegal, but it's weak. The judge will consider it, especially since they're biological grandparents. But given the abuse and criminal history, it shouldn't go far. Shouldn't, I repeated. But will it? He didn't answer. The hearing was set for 2 weeks later. I didn't tell Liam or Abby the truth, just that we might need to talk to a judge about their living situation. I didn't want to plant fear in them, not yet. But every minute leading up to that courtroom felt like a countdown to another trauma. The night before the hearing, David came into the living room with an envelope in his hand. He had shaved, cleaned up, looked better than he had in months. I want to testify, he said. I raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? I'm their father. I need to act like it. When the day came, I wore my blue church dress. My husband used to say it made me look stubborn and righteous, which was exactly what I needed to be that day. The courtroom was cool and quiet. Karen's parents sat on the opposite side with their lawyer, a woman with cold eyes and no soul behind her voice. Judge Harmon entered. Older man. Stern but fair. Thank God. Stephen presented our case. Karen's criminal charges, the abuse, the video message, the stalking photos, the medical reports. He laid out the timeline like a weapon. Each fact landed like a hammer. Then her parents' lawyer stood. She painted a picture of a confused, grieving mother wrongfully imprisoned, and 2 loving grandparents unjustly denied access to their flesh and blood. She raised her own daughter successfully, the lawyer said. Surely she can help correct the course for her grandchildren. I almost laughed. But then David stood. I used to believe that, he began. That blood meant safety. That people who shared your DNA had your best interest. But my wife, Karen, showed me how easily family can become your biggest threat. He swallowed hard, looked at the judge. My mother may not be young, but she is steady. She is safe. And my children feel joy again because of her. That's something their mother, my wife, never gave them. Ever. Judge Harmon nodded slowly. His fingers steepled beneath his chin. Then he spoke. I've reviewed all the documents. I've listened to every word. And I find no compelling reason to disrupt the children's current placement. Therefore, guardianship will remain with Mrs. Margaret Hill, pending further evaluation. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. Karen's mother burst into tears. Her father stood, red-faced with rage, and shouted, "This isn't over." The bailiff calmly escorted them out. That night Liam and Abby slept in my bed. They curled up beside me like they used to when they were little. I didn't tell them everything, but I told them enough. Sometimes people want things they don't deserve, I said. But it's our job to protect what's worth keeping. They nodded. They understood more than I thought. But just as I allowed myself to feel relief, a knock came at the door the next morning. A uniformed officer. Mrs. Hill. Yes. We received a tip from the prison. An anonymous letter suggested there may be an undisclosed safety threat involving this household. We're required to perform a wellness check. I blinked, heart sinking. A what? He showed me the letter. It was type, cold, and described me as mentally unstable, emotionally erratic, and dangerously paranoid. Karen. She couldn't win in court, so she was trying to win in chaos. Again. After the officer left, apologetically, I stared at the walls of my house, my home, and I realized I was tired of playing defense. It was time to end this, not just for my sake, but for Abby and Liam. So I sat down at my kitchen table that afternoon, pulled out my notebook, and started writing something I'd never intended to share with anyone. My story. The truth about how I grew up. Pain. The secrets. The strength it took to raise 3 children alone. The rape. The decision to keep David. The years of silence. The guilt. The hope. Every detail. Every crack in my heart that somehow never broke me. I poured it all onto the page. Not to expose, not to shame, but to teach. I titled it, The House That Love Built. And when I finished, I printed 3 copies. One for Abby, one for Liam, and one for the court. Because if Karen thought she could define me with a letter, I was going to define myself with my truth. But just as I sealed the envelopes, Patricia burst through the front door, holding her phone with shaking hands. "Margaret," she gasped. "You need to see this." She turned the phone toward me. It was a live video. From inside the prison visitation center. Karen. Talking to a stranger, someone who looked like a private investigator. And in the caption below the video, Karen reveals shocking new plan to regain custody from behind bars. The story had gone viral. And I knew. This wasn't just a battle anymore. Had become a war. Karen has gone public. Her lies are spreading like wildfire. But Margaret has her truth. And a legacy to protect. Will the truth be enough to end this once and for all? Next chapter will be a reckoning. Don't miss it. Like, comment, and subscribe if you believe the truth always rises, even when buried deep. The courtroom felt colder than usual. This wasn't like the earlier hearings. This was a custody battle with higher stakes than anything I'd faced before. Karen's parents, Harold and Mabel, sat across from us with smug expressions, dressed in matching beige like they were here for a church potluck rather than a legal ambush. They were smart, I'll give them that. They came prepared, with printed photos of themselves holding Liam and Abby from years ago, a list of donations they'd made to their church's children's ministry, and even a note from a retired neighbor claiming I'd once forgotten to turn off the oven. "I'm old, not incompetent," I muttered under my breath. David squeezed my hand. "We've got the truth, Mom. They've only got shadows." Stephen stood tall when our time came. He began by calmly dismantling their argument, point by point. "Let's be clear," he said. "These children are thriving under the care of Mrs. Margaret Hill. Their academic performance has improved. Their emotional stability has returned. Their father, Mr. David Hill, resides in the home and has fully resumed parental duties." The judge nodded along. But then Harold stood. He had a commanding voice, years of coaching baseball I'd imagine, and it echoed across the courtroom. "Your Honor, we're not trying to take the children away out of spite. We're doing it out of love. Our daughter has made mistakes. Big ones. But that doesn't mean her children should be raised by someone with a shaky memory and no legal claim to guardianship without Mr. Hill's ongoing consent." That last part was the poison, and it stung. The room grew tense. The judge turned to David. "Is it true that your consent is the foundation of your mother's guardianship?" David stood, nerves visible on his face. "It was yes. At the beginning. And now?" the judge asked. David looked straight at me. "Now I want it permanent. I've already signed the paperwork. I've asked the court to make her the legal guardian with or without my consent required in the future. Because I trust her more than I trust myself sometimes." Harold and Mabel's jaws dropped. Their attorney scrambled. "Objection, Your Honor. This was not disclosed in pre-trial documents." Stephen calmly handed the updated papers to the bailiff. "It's been filed, Your Honor. As of this morning." The judge took the file, nodded and said, "Noted. Please continue." For the next hour, testimonies poured in. Teachers, the school counselor, the family physician. One after another, They painted a picture of a healing family. But the final moment came when Abby herself asked to speak. She walked to the front of the room, her small body almost swallowed by the tall wooden stand. The judge smiled warmly. "You're very brave to be here." Abby nodded. "Thank you. Do you know why you're here today?" She nodded again. "They want to take us. But I want to stay with Grandma." "Why?" Abby paused. Her little lip quivered. Then she said something that silenced the entire courtroom. "Because Grandma's the only one who makes me feel like I'm not my mom." Tears sprang to my eyes. Even the judge blinked. "And do you feel safe with her?" he asked gently. "Yes," Abby whispered. "I feel loved. And I don't want to leave." The judge nodded. "Thank you, sweetheart. That was very brave." She returned to her seat, and I opened my arms without thinking. She rushed into them, sobbing quietly. And I held her tighter than ever. That was the moment I knew. No matter what decision came, I had already won where it mattered most. But fate had one more surprise in store. As we left the courtroom and walked down the steps, a reporter approached. "Mrs. Hill," she said, shoving a mic into my face. "Do you have a response to the leaked video of Karen's parents speaking with her on a smuggled prison phone?" Froze. "What video?" The reporter played it right there on her phone. In it, Karen's mother was whispering to her through a grainy screen in the prison visiting center. "We'll tell the court Margaret hit the kids," Mabel said. "Or that David left her alone with them. Whatever it takes." The rest of the video was cut short, but it was enough. Stephen took the phone and immediately contacted the judge's clerk. Within hours, an emergency follow-up hearing was set. By evening we were back in the courtroom again. This time Harold and Mabel didn't smile. Mabel cried. Harold looked away, refusing to speak. The judge slammed the gavel down after playing the video in court. "Motion for custody is hereby denied with prejudice. Any future attempts will be considered harassment and reported to the proper authorities." It was over. I don't mean the drama. That never fully goes away in families like ours. I mean the war. When we got home that night, I made Liam and Abby pancakes for dinner. Just because. They danced in the kitchen, covered in syrup and joy. David smiled for the first time in what felt like years. And me. I stood in the doorway and breathed. Not because I was tired, though I was. But because I could finally feel something I hadn't felt in so long. But then, just as the house settled, just as the sun dipped behind the trees, I saw it. A letter on the porch. No return address. Just one word on the envelope. Inheritance. Inside was the title deed to another property. In Karen's name. But left to Liam and Abby. And signed the day before her arrest. I stared at the signature. Because something wasn't right. It wasn't Karen's handwriting. And that could only mean one thing. Someone else is still pulling the strings. Do you believe Karen had help all along? Who forged that signature, and why now? Drop your theories in the comments. Like, share, and subscribe, because next chapter will finally bring every secret to light. And it might not be who you expect standing in the shadows. I held the envelope in my hands for several minutes before opening it again. Slowly, as if the truth inside might explode. The paper crackled under my fingers. There it was, legal language, a notarized signature, and a declaration that a second home in Karen's name, located 2 towns away, was being left in full to Liam and Abby. But what chilled me wasn't the gift. It was the date, the day before Karen's arrest. And the signature, slanted, shaky, but unmistakably not hers. I'd memorized Karen's signature from years of watching her sign documents and receipts with arrogant flourish. But this looked forged, forced, too careful. Patricia studied it next to me at the kitchen table. "This smells like a setup," she muttered. "But why? Why now?" Stephen arrived shortly after I called him. He examined the deed, ran a quick check through the real estate registry, and frowned. "This house isn't just in her name," he said. "It's tied to a trust account that started getting monthly deposits right before her conviction. Large ones. From an anonymous donor." Froze. Someone's been paying into her name. Stephen nodded slowly. And it gets worse. The name tied to the trust administrator. Karen's former college roommate. You remember Sylvia Matthews? The name hit me like a punch to the chest. Sylvia. The one who once lived with Karen for a year. Sweet voice, perfect manners, always volunteering at church, and quietly manipulating every room she walked into. Karen had cut ties with her years ago after a falling out. Or so I'd thought. I'll get a court order to freeze that property until we find out what's going on, Stephen said. We can't risk Liam and Abby being used as pawns again. But the danger wasn't legal anymore. It was personal. Because someone, probably Sylvia, had set this up not just to leave a house to the kids, but to create legal leverage. If Liam and Abby had property in Karen's name, it could eventually raise questions of visitation rights, inheritance claims, even guardianship. And I wasn't about to let that happen. That night, I tucked the kids into bed and sat in the dark by the front window, gripping a cup of tea gone cold. The moonlight washed across the porch. The wind rustled the trees. And for the first time in a long time I felt that old tension return, the feeling that someone was always watching. I whispered aloud, "You'll never have them. You'll never own them." The next morning Stephen returned with news. The trust was indeed tied to Sylvia Matthews, who was now living in a luxury condo in Atlanta. Records showed she'd visited Karen in prison 3 times under a fake name. It had all been carefully planned. But now we had enough evidence to bring it all down. We can file fraud charges, Stephen said. And have the entire trust declared invalid. You'll need to appear in court one last time. So I did. 3 days later I stood in front of a judge again. This time not to defend myself, but to defend the future of my grandchildren. Sylvia didn't show. Her lawyer tried to argue that the trust was a generous gesture from a friend. That Karen had the right to leave property behind. But we laid out everything. The forged signature, the smuggled video messages, the pattern of manipulation. The judge took one look at the evidence and ruled swiftly. The court finds that the trust was created under fraudulent intent, and the signature on the deed is not valid. The property shall revert to state review and is not to be associated with the children in any legal capacity. Furthermore, any future attempt to manipulate this guardianship will be treated as criminal interference. And just like that it was over. Really over. The next few weeks were quiet. No more anonymous letters. No court summons. No videos. Just normal life. Liam won a school poetry contest. Abby joined the art club. David started leading Sunday school again at the local church. He stood at the front in that same suit he'd worn to court, smiling with a humility I'd never seen in him before. And me. I planted roses. I bought a new porch swing. I took my time stirring oatmeal in the mornings instead of rushing through breakfast like the world might collapse. But I didn't forget. One evening I handed Abby and Liam each a sealed envelope. "What's this?" Liam asked. "Something for your future," I replied. "Don't open them until you're older. But when you do, you'll understand everything." Inside each envelope was a letter. I had written, "You will hear things one day. Stories, ways, half-truth. But I want you to know everything I did to protect you. You are not your mother's mistakes. You are not anyone's weapon. You are light. And you are free." Then one afternoon a final letter arrived. Real one. From Karen. She wrote from prison, no threats this time. No venom. Just 7 words, written in tight, slanted handwriting. "Tell them I'm sorry. That's all." I burned it. Not out of hate but to close the circle. Because apologies mean nothing when they're whispered through steel bars. And some wounds are best cauterized by fire. That night I sat outside while the kids played tag under the fading sun, and Patricia brought out lemonade. "We made it," she said softly. He nodded. We had. We survived manipulation, betrayal, humiliation. And in the end we didn't just survive. We healed. This house wasn't the same one I once feared losing. Had become something new. Something stronger. A house where truth lived. where laughter returned, where love ruled again, and most of all, where legacy was no longer something you passed down by blood, but by choice. If this story reminded you of the strength that lives in quiet hearts, the power of truth, and the courage it takes to protect the next generation, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your story matters too, and someone out there may need to hear it.